Hi, my name is Amazing from Origin, and this is my basic champion guide to Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao is a champion that excels at solo queue most in pre-made opportunities and situations because of his kit. His kit doesn't allow him to be the smartest of gankers, the smartest of invade champions, but he rather has to rely on brute force. So solo queue is the opportunity for him to shine in, and he wants to find gank paths where he knows he has a pink board down, so he can just go through the pink board in order to ensure that the gank is going to work out. He doesn't want to waste a lot of time, he just wants to brute force and make things quick. Xin Zhao excels at two things: early game ganking as well as early to mid game dueling. In both cases, he wants to have an impact on the map really early on, read his lanes well, and see what he can do. As I said before, the brute force part about him is pretty big, so he cannot just rely on the enemy to basically just play the name normally and everything like that and he's able to punish that. But he rather has to wait for mistakes to happen, and these mistakes is something are things that Xin Zhao is able to punish really strongly. So he has to wait for opportunities where these mistakes happen. He doesn't want to become a team fighter. He rather wants to win the game before that actually happens, because his kit doesn't allow him to be the strongest of team fighters, because he can be easily kited after his initial C is down, and there's no peel that he can provide technically. It's only his R, which is kind of a weaker version of his R. So he cannot insect, he cannot be the main engage tool, but he rather someone that is following up in late game teamfight. Xin Zhao wants to be the aggressor at any point of the early game, which is basically his main focus. He wants to be playing aggressively on top of the enemy jungle if he wins the matchup 1v1. He never wants to be sitting back and farming, because he's not that good at farming, so therefore the enemy jungle is probably going to get an advantage and is able to snowball that into a lead. Xin Zhao has to make sure that his lanes are covered early and he can make plays on them. He should never give the enemy the first play, but rather be the one that does the first play, unless it's a counter gank opportunity, where he should be 100% sure of what the enemy jungler is going to do and able to counter that. Xin Zhao greatly snowballs as he kills the enemy jungler once, because at that point he's able to get a nice level advantage and utilize that to do more damage to the enemy. So every time he invades afterwards, he will probably have wards coming in and he's able to read the enemy jungler more easily. So he has to look for a lot of opportunities, or every opportunity for that matter, in order to exceed in the early game, which is his strength. With Xin Zhao, you kind of want to have brute force, as I already mentioned. So you want to have the enemy overextend in order to do the most damage. It's not a situation where, with for example Lee Sin, where you can ward W over the Drake pit and then make a sneaky gank happen. But with Xin Zhao, you have to walk around or walk right through the river. So in an ideal situation, what you want to look for is to have a top or mid lane pushing for the enemy, so he can sneak up behind them or walk behind them and basically be in auto attack range before you use the E. So you want to auto attack Q, and as soon as the enemy uses the gap closer or flashes, you want to follow up with the E, and if the 3 talent strikes still didn't proc and the knockup didn't proc yet, it's gonna follow you to the E. So you basically bait the enemy team flashing away or dashing away, and then use the gap close in order to ensure that he's going to be knocked up again and therefore killed in most situations. I think if Xin Zhao is ever able to get a 3 talent strike complete on the enemy without him flashing, he's going to be dead regardless of what's happening. So you want to look for the level 3, level 4 opportunities, because this is when Xin Zhao excels the most out of any jungle, because his Q damage is insane and really gives him abilities that probably only the likes of Elise and maybe Lee Sin can match. The role of Xin Zhao in the mid game or mid to late game teamfighting is to be a secondary initiator, or someone that is more of a disruptor, to be fair. It's not a strength to teamfight, but you can still do it if you time it right and you have the right moments to kind of use your spells. It shouldn't be a black and white scenario where you just think, okay, Xin Zhao does damage, so I have to E on the backline and I have to knock them up in order to lock them down. This is not always the case. You want to look for opportunities where you can split the front and the backline or cause as much destruction as possible between them. So maybe similar to a Lee Sin, but not quite as efficient as Lee Sin is able to do it. You basically want to E on the front line and maybe ult them away from your backline, or ult the backline away from the front line, so they're gonna disrupt it and split. These are the opportunities they can look for. But in most cases, I think a basic combo on the front line and waiting for a right opportunity to basically use your ultimate is something you should look out for, and just to give your backline ability to kill the enemy front line before they kill you. If you're behind, however, I think Xin Zhao becomes really less of a threat, and he's probably the most vulnerable out of any jungle champion that is kind of popular right now to be CC'd and locked down in teamfights, because his ability in teamfights basically relies on him being able to stay alive, and it's a kind of a tank kind of approach. But even champions like Lee Sin, who become late game tanks, are able to use their mobility to get in and outside of teamfight. Whereas Xin Zhao is really singular in what he can do, and one-dimensional in what he can do, because once he's committed to a teamfight, he cannot escape, and he has to use as many spells as possible throughout the teamfight in order to ensure that A, he uses CC to the right amount, and B, he's ensuring that he gets a lot of people with his ultimate to kind of give him the ability to sustain through a team fight. So he's not the ideal team fighter, but if he wants to do it, look for opportunities to be a disruptor and be smart about it. That's basically it. E into ult flash, which is something you can think about and functions similar to how the Lee Sin ultimate flash works, but it's a lot more situational, and it's probably more going to be used for situation where you want to separate the front and back line instead of kicking someone out of position, a backline champion out of position like an Orianna or whatever it is, which Lee Sin is able to do, but Xin Zhao less likely to be able to do because his ultimate is less targeted and therefore less proficient at singling out targets, but rather to be more disruptive fights themselves. For marks, you want to use ED. For seals, you want to use flat armor. For the blues, you want to use flat CDR glyphs. And for quins, you want to use attack speed. This setup basically ensures that you have the best early game dueling, as well as the highest amount of clear speed that you can have in any kind of setup. Variations to it, where you can use MR or CDR per level in the blues, but in most cases these are less efficient than going for the flat CDR in order to ensure that in the early game you have the most damage output as well as the most amount of pressure on the map. For the masteries on Xin Zhao, you want to go for 12 or 18, simply to ensure that you're going to get the strength of the ages, which is, in my opinion, the strongest jungle mastery in the game right now. In the ferocity tree, obviously attack speed is pretty interesting, as well as the increased damage, like the double-edged sword that kind of gives you a nice in the early game especially, as well as vampirism and the oppressor. Oppressor is a mastery that some people may overlook because bounty hunter just seems something that maybe in solo queue should be more attractive, but Oppressor always will give you more damage as soon as you E, Q, or rep buff someone, so therefore it's the mastery to go with, half keystone to go with technically. In the defensive tree, we obviously have the health reach, recovery mastery coming in, tough skin, just so you could sustain better through the jungle in order to ensure that you're gonna have good clear and safe clear, as well as veteran scars kind of help you out in the early game and give you a nice little HP boost in order to fight the enemy jungler maybe even. And down the line you have insight, and afterwards you can decide if you want to go for swiftness, which basically gives you tenacity and slow resist, or you want to go for the legendary guardian mastery. This is kind of disputable, but in my opinion, in most cases, as someone that is melee and has to get to the enemy in order to do damage, being slow is the worst thing that can happen to you. So you want to cut down on the C and rather go for the swiftness mastery and to ensure that you can always do what you want to do. For skill order on level 1, you want to get either Q or W. It depends if you have a solo start, in which case you should probably opt for W. But in a start where you have a laner that helps you a bit and allows you to basically clear the camp faster, you should go for the Q, just because knock-up gives you extra damage and the 3-10 strike technically just exceeds the damage that you get from W. At level 2, basically the same concept applies, that you should either get Q or W, whichever you didn't get first. And at level 3, obviously for the gank, and to look for gank opportunities, you should go for the E. It will help. Like, this basic concept of Xin Zhao is to do stuff early game, and if you don't have like all 3 spreads at level 3, there's nothing you can do at level 3. That's just how it is, and it basically applies for a lot of other junglers too. You want to max Q first, which is basically the strongest spell in this kit in my opinion, because the CD reduction that you get by leveling up also applies to other spells, so every point in it is just really gold. Second, it's kind of a discussion about it, but I think due to the flattened ECD right now, that E is not to be max second anymore, which it used to be, but now W becomes more attractive to him, because you usually went for the E in order to ensure that you have like fast combos every time and everything like that. But now you don't need that anymore. You have the same combo speed every time because the E CD has been flattened. So the W spell, which gives you an innate crit on the 3rd attack, as well as a nice boost of heal, is just something you should look out for, especially if you look to split push later on in the game. For Xin Zhao, there are two options to go with. Either you decide to go for the Devour, which basically gives you the nice stacking option in order to be mid to late game split pusher, or you decide to go for the Cinderhulk, which is basically making your team fighter and someone that provides a lot of utility with his R and his Q and his gap closer and E in order to sit on the enemy backline and just be as annoying as he can be. I'm going to elaborate on Cinderhulk first because I think it's the more approachable build for most situations, and you should definitely start out in trying to either go for the blue or red smite depending on what your preference is, because blue smite kind of allows you to gank better, red smite allows you to duel better. So if you have a good knowledge of where the enemy jungle is at all times and you can kind of find them in his jungle, then you should go for the red smite and definitely trust your own abilities in that scenario. Whereas if you are really gank heavy and you want to be following that style, then you should go for the blue smite just to ensure that your ganks are going to be more powerful and you may not even have to get close with the E initially before he flashes. So you can do some fancy where you blue smite the enemy, walk up to him, auto attack Q, and then as soon as he flashes, you E into him and he's still gonna be slowed. So that is something that you just have to think about and see for yourself. In either way, you should path in Cinderhulk and probably obtain early boot, maybe even before finishing Cinderhulk, just to ensure that your ganks are still gonna be strong and you're not gonna be as reliant on your gap closer as it is just something that is not to be used like initially on a gank, in my opinion. You want to have the ideal situation for him is always to come from the side or come from behind, auto attack Q, and then E after the flash or after the gap closer of the enemy has been used. So just think about that. After building Cinderhulk and your initial boots, your tier 1 boots, you should probably upgrade your boots, and there are 3 options for you. Either there's a swiftness boot just to ensure that you're going to be on the map 24/7 and you're going to be walking from lane to lane and trying to gank as much as possible, which kind of replace the old mobility boots that used to be the flavor of the month technically. For the teamfight options, there's also obviously the Ninja Tabi to just give you a nice boost of armor against 80 heavy comms or auto attack heavy comms, or the Merc Treads, which would probably bode well, especially with the 15% CDR that you already have in the defense tree. If that adds up, you're going to be up to 40%, and it's going to help you stay alive in fight in case the enemy is CC heavy. Beyond that, good armor items in my opinion are Randuin and Deadman's Blade. Both of these items really give you this little edge in terms of teamfight ability and allow you to chase people down or keep people occupied, which Xin Zhao's kit is pretty good at. For magic resist option, you should obviously go for an early Spectre Scout or the Aegis which builds into Locket, just to give you an early boost of MR and maybe give you more teamfight agility, especially when it comes to the Locket, which just makes your early to mid game transition, which is basically, in my opinion, where Xin Zhao falls off, just a little bit more useful. So you're not gonna fall down as hard, still gonna be able to impact your team and impact the enemy team comp in case they're MR heavy. For the Devour route, which is the more solitary route, you should definitely try to apply a lot of pressure even if you build it, because just building Devour doesn't mean that you shouldn't farm or you shouldn't be doing any of that. You should try to scale, obviously. You should try to like do whatever you want to, but still kind of not just like go autopilot and AFK farm, but rather like try to use the extra incentive to farm to maybe obtain a bit more items, which can lead into more mid to late game split pushing, which would be something that you could pursue. For example, after the Devour, you could go for the Rage Blade, which is obviously going to be nerfed next patch, so you may not be able to see that anymore. But offensive items that you could pursue if you want to do it are Triforce, the Titanic Hydra, which is this really situational, especially if you're going to devour, the HP pool of yours is going to be a bit lower, so it's not going to be as gold efficient. But in general, just Humus, Triforce, movement speed items that just give you this extra edge in terms of chasing people down and keeping them occupied. Thanks for watching this basic champion guide. Make sure to check out the rest of the guides over at lowclass.com.